So, Poonam, and please come on stage and we shall begin it. So, a little bit of introduction of the panel and also what we are going to discuss today. So, Gary is a co-founder of Men Engage Global campaign to promote men's involvement in an equitable, non-violent caregivers and role, and a co-founder of Men Engage Global Alliance, which works with more than 700 NGOs and UN agencies towards gender equality, and is a leading voice on the worldwide on the issues of men, masculinities, and the positive change, health dynamics between men and women. Poonam has been active over 20 years, is playing an influential role to end gender-based violence. She has been also written a lot around that and on Indian feminism. She was one of the facilitators in the Sanam Fellowship, South Asia Network for addressing masculinities. So very warm welcome to you, Poonam. Suraj works with Azad Foundation, but he has also been a Sanam Fellow who has been working with men and masculinities and the gender issues for last 10 years. He was part of Nari Samta Manch and EcoNet and has been engaged with these issues. And Desmond Lunga provides leadership to the Botswana Men Engage Network, made up of 21 local organizations, which has the mandate to implement gender transformative initiatives to reduce violence against women, girls and children. He has also led mass media campaign and he hosts radio shows in 2 local radio stations. So welcome. And Velusamy Weerasingham, which is Veere, we will call him Veere, specializes in area of gender equality, conflict sensitivity, peace building and diversity with a field experience in program development and management. But he also does very interesting work with the fishermen and the fisherwomen. So we would be also hearing his experience of how does it work and how does he engages with fishermen in order to let women come into that non-traditional livelihoods. So there are some critical questions that we will be looking at and addressing. So the flow of the session is that this whole session is that we will be having 15-minute presentations from each presenter here, panelist, and then we will take up question and answers and some of the questions that are there. So some of the things that I was thinking, the basic questions, why men needs to be engaged, first of all. So for enabling environment, if we are looking at women's entry into non-traditional livelihood or for various other things, for gender equality, the engagement with men from what lens we need to look at. Are men really enablers? Why do they need to be enablers? That is also a question that we need to look at. Secondly, what motivates men to talk about gender and women's issues? What is it that is the central question? What is it that brings in, and what are their experiences that are enabling them to voice out when we are looking at? Also, isn't it also in the benefit of men that they change? Isn't it also it is important for men to recognize that unless and until women are in the workforce or have an equal role in economic activity, it also brings them a lot of benefits. So it's just not enablers, or let's not just be enablers, but also this whole framework of equality and how does we address that. And what strategies and methodologies to somewhere address or counter deep-rooted emotional anxieties that sometimes men do have, and which is very prevalent, which we can see. So we are also looking at that. And ultimately, what kind of alliances that we are looking forward for? What are we looking for it? How we are looking at it? How are we going to build those alliances? What are the central questions that will come up? What are the challenges that are there? The strategies that we have employed so far, did they work? what new needs to be done. These are the few things that we thought we will be able to look at today. And may I invite Desmond to begin with his presentation, and then we can go with Veere and then Suraj and Poonam, Gary and Poonam. Thank you. Can you please?
So thank you very much. Maybe quickly, if you may allow me, can you stand up and look at the person next to you? Just a quick exercise. All right? And so what we're going to do is that you're going to look at the person, and I want you to count. All of us can count. 1 up to 5, 1 up to 3. So what you're going to do is that when she says 1, you say 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, without losing rhythm, right? I don't want 4, I don't want I don't want 1, 2, 3. Okay? 2, 1, 3, 2, 3. So you're failing to count 1 up to 3, and I don't know why, but anyway, you can sit, and please remind me at the end of my presentation to tell you why you're failing to count 1 up to 3. Use the arrows. Okay, thank you very much. My name is Desmond Lunga. I consider myself a father, a husband, a father to 3 kids, 2 boys, 1 girl, and an activist. I got into this work because of a tragic accident that happened in my life when I was 12 years. I lost my mother, and lucky enough, my father was there for me, and he sent me to adventure camps where we were learning how to deal with bereavement and loss. And after I finished school at 18 years old, I decided to start an organization that focused on young orphaned children. And back then, it was during the era of HIV and AIDS, and we had a lot of orphans. And one thing that struck me when I was working with the young orphans was that most of them did not have fathers. So if their mother would die, they would have to live with family members. And so I did a bit of that work for about 12 years, and I decided to go into a business community and start my own business. And while I was working, I got a call from an organization called Stepping Stones. And they had had me share my stories about how I had experienced being in the delivery room. I've been in the delivery room for 3 of my kids, and I shared that on Facebook, and they were interested in piloting a program called Men Care. And so they asked me if I was interested to be part of the Men Care program, which, Gary, is such an honor to have you here. And that program has changed the rest of my life. I started implementing it, and I've learned a lot. So I'm here to share some of the lessons that I learned. So eventually, after piloting the program, I decided to co-found an organization called Men and Boys for Gender Equality. And so basically throughout my presentation, I'm just going to give you a synopsis of the situation in Africa, and then maybe zoom in a bit into Botswana and be able to talk about some of the methods and programs that we're implementing within our country, and see what kind of interventions that would need to be done, and then maybe come up with a conclusion. And I put up a picture of that lady in the military. She's one of the well-celebrated ladies in my country because she's one of the first military air pilots in Botswana. And there's a saying that says, if you educate a woman, you educate the nation. And she was given that opportunity. And now she does a lot of work around encouraging young women to do engineering course and young women to join the army and be pilots. So I'll talk a bit more about her a bit later. So to start off, in Africa, I've always had an opportunity to engage with elderly people. And the one question that I always ask, how did you raise the boy child? Why did you raise the boy child to be strong, not to cry, to be a defender and a protector? And they always tell me, back in the days, what happened was that there was no police and there was no soldiers. So a boy child needed to be strong. He needed to be there. If people wanted to attack the village, he needed to stand up and be the protector. And my argument is always, but now we have police, and now we have the army. Do we still need men that don't cry, men that are perceived to be strong, can we not allow kids to be kids? So we do a lot of programs around re-socializing boy children and ensuring that they get an opportunity. And over and above, you'll find that in Africa in general, you'd find that about 69% are men that actually do the work and are paid. And a lot of times you'd find that the payment that goes to men are way more than the payment that women get. And like we've already been talking about this, at 39%, 39.2%, it's mostly women, and you'd find that women are in probably nursing, teaching, you know, the kind of skills that we as a society always believe that that's the right kind of work that women need to do, which is the care work. And you'd find that because of that, there is a lot of backlash and a lot of violence. Women end up being violated. And in particular, in my country, in Botswana, what has happened over the years is that women are not being educated. And now there's been a shift. So more women are being educated than the boy kids. You'd find that boys are taking time to graduate at university. Some are dropping out of university because of the pressures of providing, because of the pressures of being a man, so-called men. So you'd find that there is more women that are graduating and being qualified and getting some of the jobs. And men do not know how to relate with women that are empowered and women that have jobs. And so there is, in turn, a lot of violence that men then perpetrate. And before I move on to the next clip, is that I wanted to share with you, or ask you a question, which might be a bit controversial, but it would spark and set the platform for us to talk about men's behavior. When a man has multi-concurrent partners, in our society, they usually call him a player. When a woman does the exact same thing, I cannot mention the word that we would usually call her. So this reflects on how our community has tried to make sure that women are groomed to be well behaved, to be in a certain way, and has allowed men to be notorious and men to be able to be praised for being notorious. In my culture, if a man does good things, people will say his wife has given him a love portion, and that's why he's nice, and that's why he's probably doing the care work in the house. And so the programs that we're trying to implement are trying to target such issues, to say how do we change that belief which is ingrained in people. So we do a lot of advocacy around use of media. If I get time in my presentation, I'm going to show you some of the videos. Like the moderator said, I do a lot of TV talks, radio talks, and we're trying to even encourage musicians to start, you know, passing the message and have movies and have films that talk about the positive man, because the image that the young person has of a man is usually a negative one. And there's direct engagement, where the men care program, where the one man can program, where men in the kitchen programs would come in, where we are directly engaging with the boy child or directly engaging with men to be able to see that meaningful transformation. And of course, through that, we can be able to then mobilize our communities and, of course, changing the different policies that are in place. I'll start off with the Men Care program. It's a fatherhood campaign. I know Gary is going to talk a bit more about this, and he talked about it earlier on. And we try to engage men that are expecting to be there for their partners, take their partners for prenatal care, be able to be in the delivery room, which in my culture is usually a taboo, and men are not allowed to be in the delivery room. And what we've done with this is that we've challenged the custodial culture, which are the chiefs and the elderly women, to say, please tell us why not. And the funny thing is that a lot of times you'd find that our culture is very rich, but because people do not want to unpack it. It's usually when you ask, you're told, no, you're not supposed to know about it, just know that it's not okay. So we've asked them and set them down to say, please explain, so that we can have that information and pass it on to the next generation. And so the information that they started sharing with us was such rich information. They were telling us that this is a method that was used for family planning. So if your wife stays away from you for 3 months while nursing the baby, that means the next child that you're going to have is going to be born in the next year. So it was meant for that family planning method. Second thing that they're saying is that the immune system men were hunters and gatherers, and they would go out there. And if they come and get in touch with the child during that 3 months period, the child might get infected. And we've realized this is rich information that we then are able to take in and use within the men care curriculum to educate men so that they understand what if we're asking them to be in the delivery room, they need to know that there's family planning methods, they need to know about their hygiene, and hence they can be allowed to be in the delivery room. So that's a very exciting program that we've been able to implement. There's a one-man can program, which also talks to ending gender-based violence, where we're working with men and boys, going into schools, going into communities, and asking them to come up with community action groups where they can speak out when they see violence, where they can be able to take action. And we've seen a lot of cases of men being able to report more, being able to engage with their communities. And I'm going to talk a bit about the Men in the Kitchen program that we do with our indigenous community. We got a call from one of our districts, which is the Khansi district. Botswana is partly a desert, and within that desert there is a tribe of people that are called the Basara people. Some people would call them Bushmen, but they have always lived their lives in the bush, and recently the government has decided to move them and start putting them into settlements where they are now being re-socialized to be able to have school and get the different resources that they need. But we find that within that community, a lot of women were able to go out and get jobs as cleaners and get jobs as helpers. And so a lot of men, because they were used to hunting, just stay at home and they stay with the kids. And most of the time there's complaints that the women come back from work and they find that the men have not done any work, they've not cooked. So we decided to go out there, train the men in cooking, and have them start helping the women with the care work within their communities. And we slowly watching that and hoping that maybe we can start training women in the different skills that can be able to help them to have meaningful jobs. And so some of the achievements, I'll quickly go through them. I don't know how many minutes I have. But with the men care program, like I've said, we've seen men being able to take their partners to hospitals, which is rare because a lot of men are afraid of hospitals. I don't know why. We're currently developing a strategy on men and HIV, and we're finding out that a lot of men are afraid to actually go out and test. So we've seen men being able to test with their partners. We've seen men being able to circumcise. There's a very interesting case study that we learned in one of the villages that we worked, and we realized, Gary, that the men care program seems to work very well in villages because there's a lot of community work and it's easy for men to reach out to other men. And so what this community did is that during the time when the woman is, when she is just delivered, the men would then go in for circumcision so that they can be able to heal and be able to wait that 3 months period without having sex with their partner. So we found that very interesting, and so we're encouraging men also to be able to do that, those that have not been able to circumcise. And like I've talked about the one man can, you'll find that there's a lot of reporting that we're getting. People are now open about abuse. We also have recently, the past 2 weeks or so, had our own version of the Me Too movement, where women now were posting the different abuses that they've had from different men in the workplace, in the families. And so that has kind of shook the country to the extent that members of parliament, our presidents, have given up statements encouraging women to come out and speak about it, whether the incident happened 10 years or not, be able to talk more about that. And also, you know, for us to have meaningful programs, we would need to engage with the policymakers. And so one thing that we found very important in Botswana is to work with the parliament. We've got our parliament members to sign the He for She pledge. We've got them to look at different laws and policies that can advance women. Like you saw Khomoso, the lady that I talked about, who was in the military. In our country, women are not allowed to be in the military. So until that law was changed, and now women are able to be in the military. And we have the quarries and mineral law where women are not allowed to work in the mines. And believe me, my country's economy is based on diamonds. And so that means if you can't work in the mines, then you cannot get meaningful jobs or meaningful salary or economy. And so we do have challenges. We do get pushbacks. I'm going to share a bit about the De Beers Group company. That is the main company that mines diamonds in Botswana, who their CEO, Bruce, recently signed the he for she pledge and pledged that at least 40% of women to be in leadership positions within their company. And they've invested more than $3 billion in ensuring that they take young girls to do engineering courses so that they can be able to work in these sectors. And fortunately enough for us as men and boys in Botswana, we were then contracted by De Beers to now start working with the men to prepare the environment so that these men can be able to work with the women. And we've had a lot of pushbacks because a lot of young men are saying, I've been working for this company for more than 10 years and I expected that I should be able to get a job as a senior manager. Now if you're going to be including women, what about the effort that have been made? Is this not going to be just a tokenism approach? And so trying to engage with men for us to be able to chat more about that. And in conclusion, I think we need to work together. We cannot do it alone as NGOs. We need to be able to work with our communities to change the norms. We need to be able to work with the government to prepare the policies so that we are able to see meaningful transformation. And we need to have corporates that can put up pledges, such as the De Beers Group, where we see women being allowed in those spaces and training men to be in those spaces with women without necessarily harassing them. So in conclusion, I put up Homotso. She, like I've said, is one of the women that we celebrate. And please like her page, Dare to Dream. She's called Homotso Patimo. That's her Facebook name. So she said I can talk about it, provided I also give you a link to see some of her work on Facebook. So as I promised, I'll do that. So she's doing a lot of work with young girls and young boys, encouraging them to take part, and also mentoring young women to be within the military. So thank you very much. If there's any questions, I think I will be able to answer when I sit down. But in conclusion, I'd say to you, remind me to tell you why you could not count 1 up to 3. Basically, what happens is that we are taught to count alone at school, isn't it? You never are taught to count with somebody else. And so for us, this is a very important lesson that we need to look at when we talk about gender transformative programming, where we're saying we're teaching boys certain things and we're teaching girls certain things, but we expect them then to live together. And you'd find that they are not able to live together because we're teaching them different things. But if we can teach them how to live together and teach them the same things, I'm sure that we'll be able to transform lives. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Desmond, for the presentation. Should we take 2 questions for Desmond? If there is a pressing need to have a couple of questions, then we can take a couple of questions. Otherwise, we can move to the next. You have a question there.
Just for clarification. I just didn't understand the circumcision program. The fathers are being circumcised so that they can suffer, in a sense, with the mothers when they're in the early stages of recovery from childbirth. Is that correct?
Yes. Maybe I can just explain further.
Yes, please.
Because we have a campaign around safe male circumcision. And like I had said, in my culture, there's a period called Butseti. When a woman delivers, she's supposed to be taken care of by the mother, and the man is not allowed to be with her for 3 months. And so what they found out as an easy thing for men to be able to live with their partners during that period is that if they're not circumcised, they too can also get circumcised. And that way they would be able to resist being tempted to have sex with her.
That's only one time.
Yeah, that's only one time. For the second
first
child
baby.
or third child. Yeah.
So thank you, Desmond. We will have more round of question. Is there any other question for Desmond right now? Otherwise, we'll move to second one. I think Veere will invite you to make your presentation. And then.
Thank you. First of all, I have to thank Azad to invite me to give speech. Yeah, presentation and video. First, as my friend called me Veera. In Sri Lanka, we have 2 or 3 ethnic community. Sinhalese call me Veera, and Tamils call me Weerasingham, and most Indian people call me Singh, and Nepalis call me Singham. So you have right to call me whatever you can. You're comfortable. And yes, I'm Veera. I'm from Sri Lanka. I am a father of 2 daughters. I'm partly call myself as house husband. When I introduce in TV show, wherever, house husband, most of the people laugh at me. And some of the people never heard the house husband word even. So when I asked them, okay, tell me what word you had, they said housewife. So tell me a little bit about housewife. They said that everything, cooking, everything. That's what housewife did at home. I said, I also did the same at home. Why you can't call me as house husband? Then most of the men say, it is shame to men. So I'm asking, okay, how people shame on others? There are so many things. But I do, this is my accountable, my job, my duty to fulfill my family. Why I want to shame? Then only the discussion will start about how men think about the work. So I'm starting myself as house husband, and I'm not going to talk about the long presentation. I'm doing only 3 minutes presentation and 9-minute video clip as as Shrinivas said, in Sri Lanka we in fishery industries with the support of ILO, they are doing programs. So I'm part of the training team. I train the fishermen and women and the fishery association and the decision making body and fishery corporation and the fishery ministry from bottom to up to change the entire system to enter women into fishery industry. So the video clip will give more information. Okay, shall we video it, the clip, and then we'll, yeah. Which clip is this?
Sometimes technology can be a challenge.
Next chance, I'll do presentation after.
Okay, so there is some problem with the film, so and there is some technological challenge also. So my colleague is sorting out. Till that time, can I request?
I also have a PowerPoint presentation to present.
So this is not working here. With PPT is working. I think there is some problem with the clip that is sorting it out.
PPT is working.
Yeah. So may I request Suraj to make a presentation? Veera has got a clip which is somehow is not working on this format here. So Sagar is going to.
Yeah, there, but
We can also.
yeah.
Okay. So what do we do? Oh, meanwhile, I think I'll invite Suraj to make the presentation, and we will take your presentation once this technological glitch is sorted out. Is it okay for everyone? Yeah. Okay. So Suraj, can you come and have your own presentation? Sorry for this little glitch.
The program of Azad Foundation and where Men for Gender Justice program fits in. So Azad Foundation's vision is driven by the vision of a world where all women, in particular women from underprivileged backgrounds, enjoy full citizenship, earn a livelihood with dignity, and generate wealth and value for all. We have a mission to equip resource-poor women with knowledge and skills, earn a livelihood with dignity, and then women can work as a catalyst for change. We have a program called Women on Wheels, in which we call it as a non-traditional livelihood, and we help women to become a professional drivers for breaking gender stereotypes and also for the empowerment of her. We see as empowerment is a process, and to be a part of that process, I mean, to facilitate that process, we believe that there should be an enabling environment where, the environment which supports women, that also removes hurdles and also help women to make their own choices. And as a part of creating this enabling environment, we have some programs such as, along with our Women on Wheel program, we have Parva's Feminist Leadership Program, which is with young women, and we train young women to become a leader in the community so that they can support other women to become a professional driver. We have a program called Azad Kishori 9 to 12, which this program is in Jaipur, and in this program we engage with adolescent girls and also have some training sessions with them about what could be the future options for their livelihoods, or what can be done other than the traditional livelihood options, so that girls also can think about their future lives to get into to explore such kind of livelihood options. And we have Men for Gender Justice program, we're engaging with young men to become to support basically women from those communities, and to create enabling environment for them, and to be a part of this process where women can make their own choices. Hashtag BSAKA feminist program is also one of the parts of Men for Gender Justice program. It is a training program which we conduct with which is a sort of a fellowship with young men. It's a year-long course where it's a year-long course to engage with young men from those communities. I'll elaborately talk about this program also. For people from out of India, the name Sakha means friend. So we appeal from that program also to men, be a friend, and be a friend for. So be a friend for, to end discrimination and to support women to get into the non-traditional livelihood. Plus, they can also be a friend of each other. Men can be a friend of each other to, share to oppose hegemonic notions of masculinities, and also creating such environment where alternative masculinity notions can be explored. Objective of Men for Gender Justice program is to promote and build an environment for gender equality which supports women to adopt non-traditional livelihoods with dignity, and men to challenge concept of masculinities in their lives. Basically, Men for Gender Justice program is operating in 12 communities of Delhi and 8 communities of Jaipur. We have trained 400 plus young men since 2016, and we engage with the age group of 18 to 25 years of young men. This enrollment number 15 is actually the efforts by young men to get women into enrolled into our Women on Wheels program. Key elements of this program are building perspective on gender equality and masculinity, have long-term association with young men through youth club activities so that men can work as change agents. We also do have our monitoring and evaluation methods to track changes among them. We also have possibilities and explore. We always explore to possibilities of a collaboration with other institutions so that we can work together in those communities. And this one of the important element is also a Be a Sakha, which is a Be a Friend feminist program with young men. Well, I want to add in this that, I mean, in these training programs, we have like phase 1 and phase 2 program. In a phase 1 program, we engage with men on the issues of gender and patriarchy. And in a phase 2 program, we engage on the issues of masculinities and sexualities to just to build a perspective among it, and then we, you know, like get their involvement in the youth club activities which are based in the communities. I mean, we have also created some of the materials in this program, which the short film which calls Dil Kya Chahta Hai, which means what does the heart desire. Actually, this was an experience that always with the male facilitator and male participant, there is no any women's voices, and always men discuss among each other that, you know, what kind of a men do women like, without having any women voices in the house, and you know, setting standard for each other. And that is how we decided that let's ask women in the community and the girls, or who are the driving trainees, that what kind of a men do they like. So actually, you know, it is exactly opposite. What men discuss with men about their own notions of proving themselves as a man, and the kind of a men which women do like, or which women want to be, the kind of a partner do they like in future. So we have like made this short film which we use with the young men in the communities whenever they ask how to impress a girl or how to impress a woman. So we screen that video that you can take a look yourself that what women and girls are saying about it. We have created a 3-poster set which actually setting, you know, like sharing alternative, what could be the alternative notions. Like, I mean, there is no such one definition of being a real man. So there could be multiple roles that men can play and still they can be a men. So this is how we have created a sort of 3-poster set, which I am going to show you in the next slide. Creating t-shirts, sort of a common identity during young men, because it was really difficult in a urban poor communities from Delhi to establish an identity of these young men that they are associated with Azad. Plus, we also wanted to, they should identify with themselves also. That they are a part of one group, and that is how we come up with the t-shirt saying slogan in Hindi, which actually means that this is the, now you got the right opportunity and you can oppose violence and become a friend and to be a part of Be a Sakha program. So this one poster is saying performing household chores, taking care of children, living with love and harmony, and not controlling women. This is the correct definition of a real man. Another poster says, stand together at every step, be a companion, one who shares domestic work, he is the real man. And the third one is physical abuse, abusive language, only hurt everyone, one who opposes violence, he is a real man. What we are expecting from, you know, actually engaging with these young men. So we are expecting them that they get mobilized to become a part of a youth club members, so that they can, undergo this training of a phase 1 and a phase 2, which talks about gender, patriarchy, masculinities, and they can become a part of personal transformation, so that they could at least change some kind of a social norms around and in their communities. It is all synergy building. Through synergy building, we also expect that in those same communities, young women and men can work together with the trainees and drivers in the community, so that some kind of a support system where young men, women and driving trainees can also be a part of this type of initiatives, or exploring other possibilities to become a support group. And also we are expecting them to be a part of our community activities, which actually our mobilization team holds in the communities. So these are majorly 6 domains where we track their changes: gender and discrimination, patriarchy, identifying types of violence in their own lives and also around the community, promoting non-traditional livelihood, sharing of a domestic work, and understanding concept of masculinity, what it actually means. As a part of it, we have done a perception survey recently with these young men fellows. Sample size was 563 young men from Delhi and Jaipur, and these are some of the kind of result which we got, that young men from the age group of 18 to 30 believe that 56% believe that the primary responsibility of women to take care of a house and children and outside work is the responsibility of men. 39% share that it's a very normal to slap wife occasionally. 56% men believe either completely or partially that the primary role of women is to give birth. 55% respondents either totally or partially believe that women should always obey the man and the head of the family. Same as 45% respondents believe that women should not go out the house without the permission. 85% claim that they have witnessed. Oh, this is very interesting, because here if we ask men that did you witness any sort of violence in your community, then they say yes. And if you ask that you are involved in any sort of a violence, then they say no. So they will not agree that you were a part of any kind of a violence against women. Another interesting result was when you ask that is it okay to women become a professional driver, then they would say yes. And if you ask them that are you going to help your mother or a sister in your family to become a professional driver, then they will say no. So these are sort of interesting results. I mean, these are common challenges we face staying connected with these men, because most of them are either employed or college going students, and then we work with the flexible timing with our approach. Another challenge is most of men are anxious about that feminism means women's dominance over them. So we explain them about the concept of equity and equality. And another common challenge is men's interest in the program, but we also have now BSaka fellowship and the fellows who can hold them personally. So I'm only leaving with the last slide, and so this is a sort of success moments in our programs that Raju from South Delhi says, I used to pass a lewd comment at a girl. After Azad's training, I went to her and apologized. We are good friends today. This was a sort of process of a 1.5 year. This is not the 3 lines statement from Raju. Sonu says it is better to be a good human being than being a man. And Rakesh from Jaipur actually helped a brother to understand his sister and get into the driving profession, and we have sort of 20-30 more stories that not for the driving, but someone has supported women in their family either to go out, to go for a trip or something like that. It is really good to see these young men taking initiatives to organize community meetings with women, and then they invite our mobilization team to be there. Their enthusiastic participation in campaigns like 1 Billion Rising. We recently have done a slogan and songwriting workshop with them, and they have come up with the 2 songs, which one is talking about the toxic masculinity and hegemonic masculinity, and another one is how we can live in a family with the equality. And they have come up with 10 to 12 another slogans, which actually says that how women can become a driver, and now we are using it in our community activities. And also many of them are being able to identify that what could be the alternative notions of being a man, and there should not be the one definition of being a man. And thank you so much. I've taken 1.5 minutes more.
We can take a couple of questions along with. So if there are a couple of questions from the audience, so we can address it right now with Suraj. Otherwise, we will move to the next, which is Veeray will come. His presentation is.
Thank you so much. I hadn't heard about all the evolutions in Azad recently, so it was very nice to hear the evolution of your work. I imagine it's quite hard to get the men to come at first. What do you do? How do you incentivize the men to come to the program in the beginning?
Okay, so this, what we have undergone with the process of that, we always have a dialogue with these men that, there should be a friendship, and we believe that friendship is such a relationship where least amount of filters work, like on the basis of discrimination or a caste and a class, and even with the gender. So we appeal them that you should become a friend. And one of the mobilizer strategies is also that men who actually got convinced with this program, we ask them that come with your 2 or 3 friends. And we also say in here in Delhi that if he is not coming with you for a 2 days of workshop, what kind of a friend he is? And you should ask this question about yourself, that what kind of a friendship you have among them. Friendship should be like this, that you just trust me and believe me and come with me. It would be nice to have a workshop with Azad Foundation. And for me, you just take out 1 weekend and 2 days.
So,
okay.
One last.
Suraj, what makes you to start engaging men in your program, one thing, and what is the impact of this program?
There is a history in the organization why we have started this engaging with men program in Azad Foundation. This was, especially after the rape case in Delhi in 2012, there was something going around in the organization also that we should also engage with young men. There's such a kind of a brutal rape cases, and otherwise sort of a discrimination or discriminatory activities or behaviors are there. But
so, I just quickly respond to that because I also belong to Azad Foundation. I thought I will be able to place it better. So the whole idea is that when we started working on Women on Wheels program, what happened is that there is a lot of backlash. When there is a process of empowerment happening at the home, some of the men usually got insecure, and that there is a lot of backlash in terms of violence, stopping them to come out and for the training or even go for the job. So at that point of time, very early on, we used to engage sort of one-to-one. So if there is an incident, we would go talk to the men, work out, and then that's all. Then we realized that it's not going to work unless and until we address it at the community level, at a larger level, at the societal level. it will not work. So therefore we started engaging with men in a more, I would say, strategic way, in a much long, in a much larger way, and with lot of strategies that we put in. We put in a lot of people in the ground. We started working with young boys and all that. So, but that started after we realized that those piecemeal strategies will not work. So that's how we started working with men in order to make sure that women are able to move forward.
And about the results or impact, I mean, I can share it in detail with you later on the session, but we track these 6 major domains which I have presented, and we track changes among those domains. So we can have detailed discussion after the session as well, or in the question answer session. Yeah. Thank you so much.
So thank you, Suraj. So may I request, Veera, your presentation was left in between, and I think something you spoke a bit, and then you wanted to show us a movie, 9-minute movie clip. So we can have a look at it and then
Video. Technology disturbed me a lot. I don't know why.
Population of about 500 families, sustained mainly through the fishing industry. Situated in Kilinochchi, in Sri Lanka's Velusamy village has a population of about 500 families, sustained mainly through the fishing industry. A structure of patriarchal power and control eventually leads to injustices and exploitation of women and children in any society. These women were once not allowed to be a part of the fishing industry. However, they are now not just contributing but playing a lead role for the well-being of their own community. Fishing, a source of livelihood which was once considered a part of a dominant patriarchal society, has now been restructured by the women and men of Velusamy village.
ஆணாதிக்க தொழில் என்று சகலரும் அறிந்த விடயம். ஆனாலும் மலைப்பாடில் ஒரு 4-5 வருட காலப்பகுதியில் நிறைய விழிப்புணர்வுகள் காணக்கூடியதாக இருக்குது. என்னென்னு கேட்டால், கடற்கரைக்கு செல்லாத பெண்கள் கடற்கரைக்கு சென்று ஆண்களோடு உதவி செய்தது மட்டுமல்லாமல், கடல் வத்துகின்ற காலங்களில் அட்டை பிடித்தல், அடுத்தது பாசி வளர்த்தல், அவர்களோடு சேர்ந்து நிறைய விதமான கடற்தொழிலுக்கு அவர்கள் செய்கின்ற ஒவ்வொரு தொழிலுக்கும் விழிப்புணர்வாக பெண்கள் இருக்கிறத நீங்கள் எல்லாரும் அறியக்கூடியதாக இருக்கின்றது. யுத்தம் நடந்த காலப்பகுதியில் 100க்கு 10 விதமான பெண்கள் கணவனை இழந்த பெண்களாக இருக்கின்றபடினால அவர்கள் அவர்களுடைய வாழ்வாதாரத்தை மேற்கொள்வதற்கு தேவை கருதி அவர்கள் எங்களோட நிலையான நிரந்தரமான கடற்தொழிலை நம்பி இருக்கின்ற வேண்டிய தேவை இருந்தபடினாலும், குடும்பத்தை முன்னேற்றுவதற்கும் அன்றாட வாழ்க்கையை கொண்டு செல்வதற்கும் நிச்சயமாக அவர்கள் தேவையாக இருந்தபடினால ILOவின் நிதி உதவியுடன் அவர்களுக்கு போட் மோட்டார் வழங்கப்பட்டு அவர்கள் தங்கள் பிள்ளைகளையும் அந்த கடற்தொழிலில் ஈடுபட்டு அவர்களுடைய பெண் தலைமைத்துவத்தினுடைய பிள்ளைகளை வயசு வந்தவர்களை 55க்கு மேற்பட்ட பெண் பிள்ளைகள், அதாவது பெண் தலைமைத்துவ குடும்பங்கள், வறிய இளைஞர் யுவதிகள் இதில் உழைக்கின்றார்கள். அப்போ அதால் நாங்கள் மீனவ சமூகத்தோடையும் மீன்பிடி முறைசாரா தொழில் பற்றியும் நான் நிறைய விடயத்தில் நாங்கள் பங்களிப்பு செய்து இருக்கின்றோம். முதல் கடைக்கு நாங்கள் வாரையில் தூரத்து 2 கண்டு சாப்பாடு கொடுத்தா இவர் இருக்க வர சொல்லுங்க நான் கூப்பிட்டு இன்னொரு ஆள்கிட்ட நாங்கள் சாப்பாடு கொடுப்போம். அல்லது கடமை சேர்ந்தப்போ 100 அடிக்கு கடற்கடையிலேருந்து இப்போ கடலில் இருந்தே நாங்கள் போட்டி கொடுக்குற அளவுக்கு முன்னேறி இருக்கிறோம்டா எவ்வளோ தூரம் நாங்கள் விழிப்புணர்வாக இருக்கிறோம்ன்றதோட ஆண்களுக்கும் விழிப்புணர்வு கருத்தரங்கள் நடந்திருக்கு. அவர்கள் முதல் எங்களோட குடும்பத்தில் நாங்கள் நாங்கள் கடற்கடை வருவணும், உங்களுக்கு உதவியாக இருக்கணும், அதை நாங்கள் விளங்கப்படுத்தி கணவனுக்கு அதை எங்களை அனுசரித்தாங்க வர சொல்லி நாங்கள் எல்லாம் செய்ய எங்களை பார்த்து நிறைய பெண்களும் கடற்கடைக்கு வந்து தங்க கணவருக்கு உதவியாக ஒத்தாசையாக இருந்ததால் இப்போ அவர்கள் எங்களை கடற்கடைக்கு வருவோம். அதை விட நாங்கள் இப்போ மீனவ சங்கத்து நிர்வாக உறுப்பியாக இருக்கிற நிறைய மீட்டிங்களுக்கு வருவோம். சகல வேண்டியதுக்கு நாங்கள் வருவோம். இதுவரைக்கும் எங்களுடைய கணவனோ எங்களோட குடும்பமோ சமூகமோ வேறு மாதிரி பார்த்தது இல்லை. பார்வை இருந்தது முற்காலத்தில். இப்போ ஒரு 5 வருடத்துக்கு உட்பட்ட காலத்தில் இப்படியான ஒரு பார்வையும் எங்களோட விழுகிறையில் எங்களை ஆதரிக்கிறாங்க, எங்களை வர சொல்லி ஊக்கப்படுத்துகிறாங்க. உங்களுக்கு ஆலோசனைகளும் உங்கள் செயல்பாடும் நாங்கள் தேவை. பெண்கள் மாதவிடாய் காலங்களில் வழியில் தொடக்கூடாது, இஞ்சி போட்டுகளில் ஏறக்கூடாதுன்றும் எங்களை கடற்கடையில் கால் படக்கூடாதுன்றும் முன்னுக்கு முழிக்கக்கூடாது எல்லாம் இருந்தது. ஆனால் இப்போத்த காலப்பகுதியில் உண்மையிலேயே நாங்கள் உள்ளுக்க இருந்து வெளியே வந்து எங்களுடைய வள்ளம், எங்களுடைய போட்டு, எங்களுடைய வலை, இதில் நாங்கள் தான் எங்களோட கைதான் அதற்கு மூலதனமே தவிர இப்படியாப்பட்ட சமுதாயங்கள் மாதங்களில் வாரத்துக்கோ அல்லது பெண்களோ இதில் நாங்களும் அதை உணர்ந்து செயல்பட எங்களுடைய குடும்பமும் அதை ஏற்றுக்கொண்டது. தலைவர் வீடேறி வந்து எங்கள்கிட்ட ஆலோசனை இருக்கிற அளவுக்கு எங்களை கூட்டிக்கண்டு வந்து ஒரு கூட்டம் வைக்கிறதுக்காகவும் ஒரு டெலிஃபோனில் தொடர்பு கொண்டு நாங்கள் இல்லாத கூட்டம் இல்லைன்ற மாதிரி தான் 2 பெண்கள் இருக்கிறோம். நாங்கள் 2 பேரும் நிர்வாக கூட்டங்கள் இல்லாத ஒரு நிர்வாக கூட்டமே இல்லைன்னு சொல்லலாம். அவர்கள் மங்களை நேரடியாக ஒரு சௌகரம் மாதிரி பார்க்குற அந்த ஒரு பார்வையும் எங்களை கணிசமாக சமனாக நடக்கிறதுக்கு சமனாக எங்களை நடத்துகிறார்கள் என்றதை நாங்கள் அறியக்கூடியதாக இருந்தது. இன்றைய காலங்களில் இந்த பெண்களுக்கு தலைமைத்துவ குடும்பங்களை பின்னுக்கு வைக்கிறது, முன்னுக்கு வர அப்படியான இதை ஒன்றுமே இப்போ இல்லை என்று கேட்டால் எங்களுக்கு தந்த பயிற்சிகளை விட நாங்கள் நடந்து கூட விதம், பெண்கள் நடந்து கூட விதத்தாலேயும் நாங்கள் இப்போ சாணுக்கு சரி சமனாத்தான் நாங்களும் இருக்கிறோம்.
பெண்களை நாங்கள் ஒரு அடக்குமுறைகளை வச்சுருந்தோம். நாங்கள் இப்படி இருந்தால் நாங்கள் உழைச்சி கொண்டு வரத்தை எங்களுக்கு செய்தால்தான் அந்த வேலையாக இருக்கும். பிள்ளை கொடுப்பு துவைக்கணும் நீ, விரவ தோணும் நீ, சமைக்கணும் நீ, சாப்பாடு தரணும் எனக்கு நீ, தான் விஷயமா இருந்தது ஆரம்பமாக இருந்தது. இப்போ எங்களுக்கு அந்த பணவீக்கம் குறைஞ்ச ஒரு காலத்தில் நாங்கள் யோசிக்கிறோம். ஆணும் பெண்ணும் உழைச்சா தான் இந்த காலத்தில் வாழலாம்ன்ற ஒரு எண்ணம் ஒன்று எங்களுக்கு வந்தது. அப்படி வரைக்கும் நாங்கள் யோசிக்கிறோம். எங்களோட பங்காளியாக மாற்றணும்னு தான் நாங்கள் யோசிக்கிறோம். பெண்களெல்லாம் வந்து கூடுதலாக இந்த சமூகத்தில் வந்து பொது விஷயங்களில் ஈடுபடுறதெல்லாம் குறை. இப்போ நாங்கள் இந்த புதிய ஆண்டில் நாங்கள் ஒரு மாற்றத்தை கொண்டு வர்றோம். எங்களோட கூட்டுறவுக்குள்ள எங்களோட சங்கத்துக்குள்ள பெண்கள் 2 பேரும் இணைக்கணும்னு சொல்லி இப்போ ஜாப்பில் வந்திருக்கு. நாங்கள் ஆரம்பத்தில் எங்களுக்கு ஒரு ஆண்மை என்ற ஒரு எண்ணத்தில் தான் நாங்கள் வாழ்ந்துருந்தாங்க, இருமாப்போடு வாழ்ந்துருந்தாங்க. பெண்கள் தேவையில்லை. பெண்கள் வந்து போட்டில் ஏறினாலே தொழில் நடக்கான்னு சொன்ன காலம்லாம் இருந்தது. போட்டில் பெண்கள் காலை வச்சு ஏறினாலே நீ ஏறாத அப்படி 2 சொன்ன காலம் எங்களோட வைப்புக்கே இந்த போட்டில் கலர் தெரியா. ஆனால் இப்போ இந்த மனைவி என்னோட வந்து நான் கொண்டு வர தொழிலை கொண்டு வந்து வலையை தட்டி வலையை ஏற்றி அங்கே நடக்கிற தொழிலை பார்க்குறாங்க. இன்றைக்கு இந்த மாப்பிள்ளைங்களோட தொழில் நடந்துருக்குது. அதை கொண்டு வந்து அவன் சந்தையில் கொடுத்து இன்றைக்கு அதின் நிலையில் பெறுவதை பார்த்து பில்லை வேண்டுற அளவுக்கு வந்து நாங்கள் பெண்களுக்கு அந்த நிலையை உண்டாக்கி வச்சுருக்கோம். பெண்களுக்கு ஒரு சமமான உரிமையை கொடுத்து வச்சுருக்கோம். கடலே தெரியாத பெண்கள் இன்றைக்கு பாசி வளர்ப்பில் இவ்வளோ தண்ணிலேருந்து பாசி கட்டுறாங்க. இன்றைக்கு அட்டைக்கு போகிறாங்க. அட்டைக்குன்னு சொன்னால் படிக்க போகிற 5 மணிக்கே பெண்கள் படிக்கிட்டு அந்த பொருட்கட்டைன்னு சொல்லி இவ்வளோ தண்ணியில் போய் அட்டையை புறாக்கி கொண்டு வந்து இன்றைக்கு கொண்டு தந்து சீவிக்கிற அளவுக்கு இருக்குது. ஒரு மாதத்தில் அவங்களுக்கு 8,000 10,000 15,000 ரூபா 20,000 விலைக்கு உழைக்கிற அளவுக்கு அந்த பொம்மனியை உருவாக்கி அந்த பெண்களுக்கு வேலை செய்கிறாங்க. இன்றைக்கு அந்த கணவன் கொண்டு வந்து அவங்களோட வீட்டுக்காருக்கு சாப்பாடு கொண்டு கொடுக்குறான். இன்றைக்கு நான் கண்கூட கண்ணால் பார்க்குறோம். அப்படியே பாரு மனைவி சொல்லியிருந்தேன், உடுப்பை ஊறவை நான் வந்து கசைத்தாரேன்னு சொல்லி அவ்வளோ தூரத்துக்கு எங்களை மனதுக்குள்ள எங்களை மண்டைக்குலாம் அந்த இது எண்ணம் வருது. அப்படியே அவளுக்கு அவ்வளோ கஷ்டப்படுத்த விடப்படா. அவள் ஒரு நல்ல கட்டிக்காரி பிள்ளைகளையும் பராமரித்து வளர்க்குறா. அப்போ நிறைய கஷ்டமாக இருக்கக்கூடாதுக்காண்டி நான் சொல்லி நம்ம வீட்டுக்காரிக்கு உடுப்பை ஊற வைங்க, நான் வந்து கசக்கித்தாரேன்னு சொல்லி இதெல்லாம் வந்து எங்களை நெஞ்சுக்குலேருந்து இப்போ வந்து வார விஷயமா இருக்குது.
இப்போ பார்க்க போனால் இப்போ அவங்கள வந்து நாங்கள் கட்டாயப்படுத்த இல்லை வேலைக்கு. நீ உழைச்சிட்டு வா, நீ வேலைக்கு பார்ப்பேன்னு சொல்லி அவங்க விருப்பப்படுறாங்க. நீங்கள் உழைக்கிறீங்க, நான் எங்களால் முடியாதா, எங்களால் முடியும்னு சொல்லி அவங்க ஒரு எடுத்துக்காட்டை செய்யிருக்காங்க. நாங்கள் அதுக்கு ஒத்துழைப்பு வணங்குறோம். வெறுமனே நாங்கள் வந்து இப்போ விதவைகளுக்குண்டு சொல்லி முன்னுரிமை என்று நாங்கள் கொடுக்கல. பெண்களுக்கு நாங்கள் முக்கியத்துவம் கொடுக்குறோம். இப்போ இப்போத்த கால சூழலில் வந்து பொருளாதாரத்தை எடுத்துக்கணும்னு சொன்னால் ஒரு குடும்பத்தில் வந்து கணவன் உழைச்சி ஒரு 4-5 பிள்ளைகள் இருக்கா, அவங்களோட படிப்பு, சாப்பாடு, அவங்களோட வாழ்வாதாரத்தை கொண்டு போயிடாமல் இருக்குது. அதனால் வந்து பெண்களும் இதில் உள்ளுக்கு வந்து இறங்கி தொழில் ரீதியாக செய்ததில் வந்து உதாரணமாக வந்து கடல் பாசி வளர்ப்பு, மீன் வளர்ப்பு அப்படியான போன்ற விஷயங்களை வந்து கொடுக்கைகளை வந்து அவங்க தாங்களாக முயற்சி செய்து அவங்க முன்னுக்கு வராங்க. இப்போ அதில் போனால் வலப்பாடு கடத்தொழிலாளர் கூட்டுறவு சங்கத்தில் இப்போ 2 பெண்களுக்கு நாங்கள் எங்களுடைய அவையில் ஒரு நிர்வாகத்துக்குள்ளே கொண்டு வந்து நாங்கள் அதில் கலந்து ஆலோசித்து அவைகளுக்கு 2 பணியாளருக்கு நாங்கள் வேலைவாய்ப்பு கொடுத்துருக்கோம். அதே மாதிரி இந்த ஐஎல்ஓ கட்டிடத்தில் வந்து நிறைய பெண்கள் வந்து இப்போ கணவனை கூடுதலாக வந்து இவே தான் கூட வேலை செய்கிறார்கள். கணவனை இழந்த ஆட்கள் வந்து அவங்களுடைய வாழ்வாதாரத்துக்காக வேலை செய்கிறாங்க. இப்போ அதுக்காக வந்து நாங்கள் வந்து எங்களை சமூகத்தால் நாங்கள் முன்னுரிமை கொடுத்து தான் இருக்கிறோம்.
The change in this community has resulted in the women being socially and economically empowered and their children having a better environment to grow up in. The women and men of Velusamy are working together as team members and decision makers, creating a change that would no doubt serve as a role model to other male-dominated industries across Sri Lanka and hopefully the rest of the world.
Thank you.
That video clip give more information. I think you get more information, especially when men change his attitude, his behavior, and men value women's role, and also men challenge and change the patriarchal value which, from the childhood, it impact women and industry and the society. So as others explained, we use several tactics, methodologies, so on, to sensitize that man. Even not older man, even young men too. The last one, 23 years old. So when the new generation also sensitized, the change will be sustained. Otherwise, people engage only the older men. When the older men die, the younger men will start the same as the society expects from the young man. So the change, it should be in old, young, and the circle. So few presentation, I think we don't know want to presentation, no?
Yeah, I think this is quite engaging.
Yes.
And I mean, I'm just in interest of the time. Is it okay if we take now questions later on, because otherwise we will. So thank you so much, Veere, and we will get back to you with a lot of interesting questions that are there. So may I request Gary to come and make his presentation. Do you also have some PPT, Gary? Because we do really today we really had a challenge with the technology. So yeah, let's hope it works.
Okay, there's a film too, but we don't have. We have time for a film.
Yes, we have.
Okay, I may use it depending on time. Like Desmond, I will start with a personal story. 21 years ago, when my daughter was born, I was in Chicago working on my doctorate in child development. My wife is Brazilian, and she was working full-time. She was the breadwinner for our family at the moment while I was studying and working part-time. And in Brazil, mothers get 5 months paid maternity leave, 5 whole months. And in the US, we have 0 guaranteed paid leave, but 6 weeks unpaid leave. So she took some leave, and we had a caregiver, but even when we had a caregiver, I stayed at home 2 days a week caring for our daughter. And many things happening during that time. One was watching the number of women who would come up to me and say, and want to offer me help, because they thought obviously as a man I didn't know what I was doing. caring for my baby. Others would ask if something happened to my wife, if she had died, or... but the presumption was something grave must have happened that I would be caring for our daughter. Along the way, I was also doing interviews and work. I was coordinating a support group for young men who were coming out of prison. They had been involved in gangs in Chicago. And occasionally, if our caregiver wasn't available, I would take my daughter along. And in the course of a 9-month baby, for example, they're with us, watching men who were angry at the world, whose lives were filled with lots of trauma, opening up when they would see the smile of this little girl who was kind of looking up at them and thinking, you're going to play with me. You're going to be an interesting person, aren't you? And watching men who were often sullen and didn't want to do much of anything, didn't want to talk to anyone, opening up and telling about their own life stories. So I tell that because it's a very real issue to me. It's very personal. And I think it also was early in, as we moved back to Brazil about a year later, and I started Promundo. My daughter now refers to Promundo as her more famous brother. And, but a lot of the ideas formed with this notion that caregiving is something that can bring out the best of us in men. And also formed a lot of our work, like Azad and many other groups. We've been doing a lot of group education work with young men, and a lot of the Men Engage work globally has been in the context of small groups with men, making some important community change. But I think what caregiving and the care work and the unpaid care burden allows us to talk about is a true structural driver of gender inequality. This is where it starts. What we often call the gender binary, this is it. Where we frame the world to say what happens outside the home, in leadership, in the hunting that Desmond talked about, the stuff outside the home that we consider important, that we consider the really heavy stuff, we say that's for men, and we say the world in the home of caregiving and the care of bodies, the food for our bodies, all those things we consider lesser work and the work of women. So we're not just doing this to do a few groups and make men feel good about being involved caregivers or involved fathers. This, we believe, really is the structural driver, or one of the structural drivers of patriarchy. It makes men emotionally distant. It cuts us off from better parts of ourselves. And it tells women, you're a lesser being, you must stay in this space. So I think that's where we really started with the ideas behind Men Care. We started in 2011 with this idea that we needed men to be doing half the global care work. So I want to share just a little bit of what we've been up to in thinking about the big picture. Where are we globally looking at care work? What are some of the things we've been trying? And what are some areas where we think we need to get a little bit better? So I shared this data with you before, but I think it is important to acknowledge just how big the inequality still is. Globally, women are doing 3.3 times the amount of daily care work. And if we look at it by region, here's the range. Even in the wealthiest countries in the world, where we have pushed so much for women to be in the workplace, and in some countries their workforce participation is equal to men, they're still doing, on average, twice the amount of caregiving that men are. Then in this part of the world, women are doing about 6.5 times the amount of caregiving. So I think it's important to say, even as we sometimes hold up Iceland or Sweden as being the champions of gender equality, even there, women are doing twice the amount of hands-on care work. We've made very little progress on it. Now, lots of times when I present this data, I don't keep many of my men friends. They're like, would you quit denouncing men, that we're not doing our part? And then they'll say, the next thing they'll say is, but wait a minute, I work outside the home. I work a lot of hours outside the home. Even when we add up women's work in the home and women's paid work, compare that to men's paid work, on average around the world, women are doing 30 minutes more every day if we put those two kinds of work together. So men in the room, even though we may be working more outside the home, women still spend more time working every day than we do. Added it up, you can probably get to about a week to 2 weeks of free vacation that men get every year compared to women. So what drives engaging men more in care work. Many of you know the multi-country study that we've done that's also been carried out here in India called IMAGES, or the International Men and Gender Equality Survey. Across the world, as we've looked at what factors drive whether men do more of the care work, there's a lot of them involved. There's the issue of attitudes. Do I think I can do this as a man? Men who have those attitudes are more likely to do it. Whether the woman works outside the home. Men are. We heard from Desmond's story. We heard from Veera's story, my own personal story. We are, some of us, responsive to that if our partner's working. It matters if we have more education. It matters the kind of work we're doing. It matters if we have leave, if we're in a formal workplace setting. But the biggest driver that we saw was whether your own father did this. So men who saw their own father do some kind, or other man in the household, do some kinds of hands-on care work, are more likely to do this work themselves. Pretty obvious. If men can see it, we can actually learn how to do it. We see it as something that goes along with being male, that it's not just something that women do. But we're stuck with huge social norms there. And sorry, this is kind of hard to read, but the important thing is to look at that 100% up there. This is women and men around the world believing that women's main role is to change diapers, give baths to children, feed children. That should be what mothers do, what women do. And you can see just how much, in much of the world, particularly in parts of the world where women are not as involved in the paid labor force, many women and men continue to believe that. This is still women's work.
India didn't have the data.
We dropped it out. I can't remember why, but it was there was one segment of the population we had it. It was also quite high. So most women say that caregiving is their most important role in life, more important than other things they do outside the household. And this is not to say that it's not important, but it is to say how much work we have to do to change norms and identities, both for women and for men. But if it looks so difficult to drive the change, there's also a few bright spots here. Many men in many parts of the world tell us they would work less if they could spend time with their children, if they had the means to, financially could afford taking time off, that they would like to spend more time with their children. Even so, though, many men see, if you ask them about being a caregiver, they see their most important role as being the provider, still the breadwinner role, which I think is important. We should not discount that it is important that we as men and women bring income into the household. That sustains our households. And I do believe that can be caring and caregiving as well. But it does tell us, again, how difficult it is for men to see our roles as the hands-on caregivers. Interestingly, another thing is that men think the world thinks they should do more caregiving. When we ask them about their caregiving, men everywhere in the world tell us they do more of the caregiving than women say men do. So either men think we should say, yeah, I do it, but women don't see it, or we only do it when women don't see us do the work, or maybe we're doing the care work in some other household that's not our main partner. That's another problem. But all this is to say that there's big challenges there, but yet when we ask men, or if we bring a small child into the room, as I did with my daughter occasionally, lots of men gravitate to this immediately and say, yes, this brings something good to me. I want to do something about this. It doesn't mean men are immediately wanting to do the dirty work necessarily, but it does mean that many men seem open to this. So what are we doing to actually make it happen? Well, if we look at some of the biggest social programs out there that do have a goal of changing women's economic empowerment situation or family livelihoods, we see that we're not doing very much. I mentioned before this review we're doing of social protection and cash transfer programs. Huge programs with millions of beneficiaries built into governments around the world being used and rolled out, but doing very little to try to change the care environment and nudge men along. So we started MenCare in 2011 with this goal. There are now 50 countries that are part of it. We've been doing global advocacy around parental leave, around changing norms, about engaging men via the health sector. We've also been developing what we call gender transformative parenting, which Desmond was mentioning they've been carrying out in Botswana, getting men to come together and offering them some basic skills, talking about how men can do this, trying to shift the social norm where they see other men doing this. Often we'll bring women into the room as well, who also may need some of these skills, but often because women are the gatekeepers to whether men can actually do this. In some parts of the world, women will say, well, I don't actually trust my husband with a baby. In some cultures, it's not considered appropriate that men actually handle children before they're about a year old. Some cultures believe that men are dangerous to children until the children are big enough to run away from them. I'm not making this up. We find this in our formative research. So it is about how do we make this normal? How do we engage women in that as well, including helping women stand back? When I was doing some of this first caregiving for our daughter, just to share one story, my wife would call me about every 27 minutes. She's a psychologist. She had clients, and I knew when she was finishing with one client and about to start another, because that's exactly when she would call me. And she would go through the list of all the things. Did I do this? Did I do that? It's kind of like, I'm doing a PhD. I think I can do a few of these things. So I just started turning the phone off, which made her very angry. But at the end of the day, I said, how does our daughter look? Does she look okay? Well, that felt a little mansplaining. That felt a lot like mansplaining. But I did finally, how can we work out a trust that I can do this and you can do it? We may do it slightly different, but our daughter seems to be fine. So how do we develop that sense of trust? We've been working at building this into government ministries, either early childhood or into women's economic empowerment or into the health sector. The parent training, and I'll just share, we have done some rigorous impact evaluation in a few countries, and finding that if we can get men to come through the sessions, we can see real change. We can see change of men doing more hands-on care work. We can see violence reduce, both men's violence against women, as well as both parents' violence against children. We include couple conflict issues, how to communicate better to reduce conflict. We try to do some hands-on activities where men actually have to get some practice doing some hands-on care for children. In some parts of the world, that may be with a doll first, before they have their hands on a real-life child. In the case of Rwanda, we've been doing recruitment at the prenatal visits, because finding that's a great moment to get men. They're worried often about income. Will I have enough income? What will the relationship be like? What is it going to be like as my life changes and our life changes as a couple? So that's been a very important moment to get men in the door. So now we're working with a number of ministries to figure out ways that we can scale it up. In Brazil, we've been able to build it into the prenatal visit. It's been very difficult to get men in Brazil, and South Africa has had this challenge as well, to get men to come for 16 or 18 sessions. But at least we're getting them at a prenatal visit. They'll be invited to come in together with their female partner, and then he's invited to come back for a checkup for himself. That includes HIV testing, a basic checkup. It's often, for many men, one of the first or few times they come for primary health care services for themselves. And we use that as a moment to talk about care for your own body, because there's another life that's going to be depending on you being safe and well. And some of those men will invite to groups, and they'll want to come, but many men will only get that contact. But it opens up the possibility that he then comes back with the child to be part of the healthcare system, and at least to plant that one big social service institution says we expect men to be involved in their own care, but also to be involved in the care of children. As a result of that program in Brazil, it's now implemented in about 40% of municipalities in Brazil, and has become the single largest entryway for men into primary health care services. So they're both paying attention to their own health, but also becoming partners in child health. So this is where we think things that work. Parent training, we think, can work. If we do it well, if we can find ways to scale it up, if we can incentivize men to come. We think that workplace policies can encourage men to do more of it, particularly bringing childcare to the workplace, as we had talked about before. I mentioned the health sector approaches. We think those can work. Partnerships with workplace and corporate sector. We know that the decisions made by big corporations determine a huge amount of whether we have the time that we want outside the workplace. So I think I'm glad to see this event has many corporate sector partners as well. We need to figure out ways that we embed this in big efforts to promote women's employment in TL and otherwise. Brazil's big cash transfer program is called Bolsa Familia, and it reaches about 11 million households in a country of about 200 million. So it has an impact on about 40 million individuals, so nearly 1 in 5 people in Brazil impacted by it. It's money that goes to women. I'm running out of time here, yep. It's funding that goes to women. Data showed that there was no evidence that it changed the caregiving divide. In fact, in many cases, the money was used to say, well, we don't really need her working. That money coming in pays her to do the care work, which is good at one level, but it didn't change any of the household dynamics. So we advocated to work with the national government to say, can we do some incentivization to bring men into the equation? At the very least, reach the caseworkers and provide some courses to try to talk about helping women get into the workplace and engaging men to do some of the hands-on caregiving. There's lots of other ways. I think the field is just beginning to think about what is it that we need to do to nudge men into these spaces. And there's a huge amount more, and I think we have more question marks than we do big answers. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Gary, for this scintillating and very thought-provoking presentation. I mean, a lot of personal narratives and men who are also sitting there where it is also some way, and I can also relate it to myself, being a father who, we had, now the child is 11 years old, but, I remember when I used to take care of him, 5 to 6 people around the neighborhood will say, oh, your wife is sick. I said, no, she's fine. I'm the one. So I know paternity leave is just, in India it's just a new thing, but it's something which will touch a chord, because unless and until, how can you have those sensitivities and without, without actually experiencing it, you cannot change. And that experience has to happen. So thank you. May I invite Poonam to take us through what you think, and especially looking at the patriarchy. We look at that. We also sometimes wonder, for men also who are also product of patriarchy, how do we actually move this envelope, not just even for men to address it and to look at it, because leaving power is not an easy thing. So how do we go about it? Something that you would like to, bring in. And may I also request all the panelists to come, because I don't think there is any more presentation, so we can actually move to the stage. And then, so after Poonam, we will take some questions, and a couple of questions that I have for the panelists. If it is okay, I can ask them, and then we can also, engage in that. Few more questions.
So thank you very much, and thank you to all the panelists for giving me insights into what's happening around the globe. And like Shrinivas said, my brief was to essentially look at the South Asian context and comment on its linkages with feminism and from a feminist perspective, and also how do we build alliances with the men's movement for gender equality. Well, and I've been thinking about this since yesterday, since I had to make a presentation today. And I went through my own existential crisis. And, I went into this reflexivity mode. There's this term in research which says that a researcher, when goes into the field, has to become aware of their own biases. And I started thinking as to what do I feel about this work with men and what the men are doing from a feminist perspective. And the fact, maybe some years ago, I was completely sure of my very objective position of that, if you think gender, you think women. In a gender situation, men are oppressors. And so, women are the ones who are at the receiving end. And I was very, very clear about this situation. The fact that I was thinking about it today, to some extent, is, success of the work with men. And I think also our own, the movement of our own position as feminists, in terms of saying there's no way out. So that's where I stand today. I am ambiguous to some extent. So, but there is one issue there. Fact remains that men are very visible in women's oppression. Men are the ones who are perpetrating oppression on women, and we are very clear. In men's case, they are doing it to themselves somewhere. So that is where the difference is. And you know, if you talk of the agency that the men have and the agency that the women have, I do put the onus of changing much more on men than women. And so, you know, when we talk of, I mean, I do believe that there is no empowerment without power. So empowerment is not this notion of the mind and the heart, where women are empowered and men are, like, you know, we can empower women to take steps, kind of a thing. So in women's case, they need power to empower themselves. And in men's case, well, there's certain amount of disempowerment which has to happen, which is humanizing of themselves in order to empower themselves. So I think this is the subtle difference that we need to sort of position this whole dialogue in. The other, and the other difference in South Asian context, and I think what Gary was mentioning in the West, so across the globe, we do have evidence that men have reacted to difficulties in their caregiving role by doing more suicides, by becoming abusers, by becoming depressed. Basically to do with their breadwinner roles, they have reacted to them like this. And there's enough research. In West, you have, even in America, for example, you have research which it's got into policy as to boys' underperformance in school is becoming part of the policy dialogue in the West. Whereas in the poor countries like of India and South Asia, there's not enough evidence, not enough research, and we do not also have the resources to do that. So that's the difference between this. So we do not know what is the long-term implications of this crisis of masculinities and whether more equal and equitable gender relations can be forged. It's largely, the jury is still out, and it's an unexplored question for us as to what extent is it going to lead to more gender equitable relationships. To me, at this point in time, the work with men, okay, I'm losing this thing. So the other aspect is the feminization of poverty that you have. It's not just about number of women who are getting poorer, but it's also about the social and the economic consequences of who controls income and who decides how income is to be spent. So in India, there has been a fall in women's participation in the labor force. In 2005, the participation in labor force was 36%, and in 2017, it was 25.1%. So that's the kind of fall. And the other side that you see, okay, I'm getting a little nervous. Can I have some water? And I don't know why.
You should feel comfortable being critical on this issue.
No. I think once in a while, I just can get into a mindset where I can feel this. So that's... No. So, no, let me catch my breath and I'll do it. So you also have a situation of where, women's participation in the paid labor force is going down. At the same time, there's little evidence whether this increase in incomes of women in the paid workforce led to any amount of lesser drudgery within the home. So in India, for example, you have a situation where women perform 90% of the housework within the house, which is one of the highest in the world. There's ample evidence also to say how it impacts women's health, and there is a possibility, and a very strong one, though we don't have enough research on it, that girls may be asked to drop out of schools, ensuring a poorer future for themselves. So, I mean, that it has a long-term impact on girls. So against this, I'll come to the NTL space later, but you also have a situation of where the state is now withdrawing social spending, you have liberalization, you have privatization, and what happens in that scenario is that the cost of social reproduction shifts from the paid economy to the unpaid economy. Once again, it sort of starts falling on women. If I recall the NTL, coming back to the non-traditional livelihood space, way back in 80s, I remember the Forum for Operation on Women in Bombay. They started an electrician's class for women, and they had to shut it within 3 months because women could not just stay on in that class. Similarly, Vimochana in Bangalore, they started a garage mechanics workshop for about 4 women in 80s, and these initiatives had to shut down because they just couldn't sustain themselves. The fact that today we have many more such initiatives and they are sustaining themselves, in a way is indicative of the fact that there's higher levels of acceptance and readiness. I personally think that this is driven by 2 things. A is the aspiration of girls themselves and families themselves to sort of make a better living for themselves. But however, there is no evidence to suggest that women getting into NTL will change their traditional roles or not. So we don't have enough evidence of that. My sense is that women take on the double burden and they also lead dual lives. So that's what happens when a woman gets into the non-traditional space for women. I would say the same thing is the case with the work with men for gender equality. I think both of these activities or initiatives actually, they are not yet movements. I mean, we have a proof of concept, but we may not have the pathways to change. So we have enough, there's still material for case studies, they are anecdotal. However, we do not have a large enough thing, if I do this, this is what is going to happen, this is the change I can see. So and also somewhere the work with men is getting into very soft spaces. Caregiving is fine, but let's say in South Asia, where women are so disenfranchised, women don't have property, they don't have mobility, all these issues I think are much bigger in the South Asian context, where the community is very, very heavy on women. I mean, it's a community society. You are not an individual in the South Asian context in most societies. And that is where it's sort of, I think we need to sort of look at that. And that is where the movement for men has not really touched, in my head, substantive issues. I think it's still working in a very tightrope, very baby steps on what men can do without really hurting the power balance. So in that sense of the term. So we do require more research and policy initiatives. But some of the barriers, I think some of the things that we didn't touch on was sexual autonomy of girls. When you get into the NTL space, when a woman is becoming independent, she's going into, she's becoming mobile, she's going out of the home, and girls are exercise. I mean, they get harassed, at the same time they also exercise sexual choices. So those again are becoming issues. And that's why, for example, I was like looking at some of the work. So one is, for example, marriage is as important for girls as employability is for men. So moment girls get into, so they sort of work against each other. And somewhere the NTL skill training initiatives typically are remaining within the binary of the gender roles. They are beyond a point. Very few initiatives are crossing that boundary. Mostly what you have is tailoring in rural areas, beauty parlor, you know. So, and somewhere the agencies are playing safe. I was talking to somebody in Dalit Shakti Kendra in Gujarat, and they have taken away mobile phones from the boys and the girls. So I'm saying somewhere, I think we are still walking the tightrope of acceptance by society, and at the same time getting into a non-traditional space. So I don't know how that whole contradiction or whatever it means will work for us. And lastly, I think there is a crisis of masculinity, but you still have patriarchy which stands stronger and it's getting stronger. So how do we sort of work on these two aspects that are happening simultaneously, much more so in the Indian context currently, where patriarchy is really very, very powerful at the moment. I think somebody mentioned in the morning how the idea of opportunity is being taken away while, so that's how the patriarchy works. So there is a certain amount of subtleness to it. It's becoming much, much more subtle in the way it will operate. But so you have equality of wages, but you don't have equality of opportunities. So I think that is where in this whole space, I think the alliance with men has to become much more robust, and I think much more questioning in some ways. And we need, like I think what I think Desmond was saying in Africa, where people do circumcision. I think one of the things which would come into my head is, oh, in that case, then he's also away, he's healing himself and maybe not helping in the caregiving in the initial part. So I'm just saying that's the way it works, sort of. We need to complicate things a little more because, you know, while you're doing one thing, it's like, you know, I cover one foot and the other one becomes sort of. So I'm saying we need to sort of look at this complexity a little more. Alliances with men, I personally think men's movement, I think it began off very well. It began off with saying we are for gender equality. It is by men who are feminists, but I have a feeling these men are the last of the few. The men and the men's movement may take its own path. It may not necessarily be a movement for gender equality. It may be just a movement for the crisis of masculinities, and that's my fear. Thank you.
So thank you so much, Poonam. I think, it's all, I know the Kamla, you, and they have met many feminists will make sure that there will always be a conscious keeper where men will be feminist and the engaging with men, especially men for gender equality. This has to be from the feminist space. So I think, Poonam has to leave in next 10 minutes. So if there are questions that Poonam can, you have a specific questions to Poonam, you please, I'm requesting you if you can ask her, because then you will be leaving in next 7 to 8 minutes. So quick couple of questions for Poonam. Any pressing question, anything that, clarification, anything that you have, because she has a flight to catch. Unfortunately, we will not have you for a longer period, but that's what it is. So, from the audience? Okay, please.
I just want to thank you before you leave for raising the issue of power. I would like to see a men's movement that is challenging the patriarchy at the level of corporatism. We've heard too many things, I think, from speakers about how the corporate sector is our ally and all, which is, there may be men who are allies and there may be corporations who are allies. Men, as a gender, are not our allies, and the corporations are not our allies. Until we overthrow the power relationships, until we go deep into the power relationships, you're good guys. But you're just a table full of good guys, I'm sorry. And keep it up, but do bigger things.
No, it wasn't. It's not like we ask questions and questions and questions and they never get answers.
So, any other question that you have to Poonam?
Yeah, to everyone.
I think we could start with
Oh,
that.
okay.
So, as he mentioned that once the woman, his wife leaves the home and goes out to work, she keeps calling just to check up on him, right? So that's the scenario with a lot of families. Women themselves or mothers or anybody makes it a point to be a guard, keep a watch on the son, on the husband, just to be sure that even if they are the babysitter for the day, they are doing a good job of it. So are women themselves ready? Do you think so?
Yes.
Everyone.
Then Suraj wants to respond, I guess.
No, I just want to share the other side of the story, the different story which we have in Azad. Once we have booked a Uber cab, and suddenly like our driver turned out to be a woman. And then obviously in Delhi, almost all female Uber drivers are trained by Azad. And I was so excited about that. I work in Azad Foundation. I got a Uber driver who is female, and let's go and talk to her that where she got the training and all. Then I have seen her. So she was driving this during the period of 11:30 p.m. in the night. She got 6 phone calls, and must be a sort of her partner was calling her that when she can be back home. And so it also might be a thing that the
point you are making about the control, whenever women are doing the kind of a non-conventional, non-traditional role, and then the sort of insecurity among men and the kind of a control that what is she doing, finally we requested her that she can actually park her car, just talk to him, settle her anxieties or control, whatever, and then she can move ahead. And so she also asked, like, there should not be any less rating after this thing because you got late, and yeah, that's fine. I mean, this will not be like less rating, right? And you can talk to her. So this is another example just to add.
No, someone did mention in the morning that women do get power from their caregiving roles. So that's part of that.
And also, I never feel it's wrong, because until women feel safe, no, they are more concerned about the baby. Until they feel safe or confident about men, whether he's look after a baby, make sure he's okay, she covered. I think for me it's not wrong. Yeah.
I wonder if there is not a psychological relationship which is more because of a woman going through the process of she has been carrying the baby for so many months, and there had been inner communication which has been developed, and after that a woman naturally or psychologically there is a kind of feeling that the baby is to be taken care of by her, or there is that kind of a relationship that develops in the mother-baby relationship. And isn't that also a need for the woman also a little bit like that to care when the baby is small especially? So the women, some of the ladies in my own office, they feel when the child is left and when they are sick, they feel very bad. They become restless. So the baby is something so much a possession to her. And usually the men are not that sensitive also towards the babies when they are not so patient oftentimes. So it is difficult to really to break, I think.
So I think what you are saying is absolutely right. Men needs to inspire more confidence in women that they are good caregivers. I mean, there is no question that it's not about control, I guess. It's not about control that women don't want to leave those things. It's about also that because they have a lot of experiences are there that men have not really been able to do what is desired. So therefore this anxiety is there, and I don't think it's for men to learn and to graduate in that sense rather than anything else, I guess. We might have the PhD, but we still have to see how to change the nappy. It's something that needs to be done, and it has to be done perfectly.
Okay, I have a question to all male panelists, because I see the reason we would like to have men in our allies. Actually, you can talk to other men. Men listen to men, actually. And then sometimes I just had the feeling it's a bit frustrating when women in our program say, because I was here because my husband supported me, or my husband let me do this. Yeah. It's important, yes, we appreciate men support women. Yes, this is really appreciative, but also you have a role to play to convince other men to support. So in that perspective, I would like to listen your experience. Did you encounter any challenges or pushback from your male counterpart or male colleagues supporting, or did you feel yourself you may need to change, not changing someone else, but you may need to change, and then how you cope with, how you overcome that feeling?
So we can take a couple of questions. One more, I think we can take two more. We will take two questions, and then I think Gary and Desmond, can you want to respond?
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly respond to say there's a question that was posed that maybe we are the last generation of men. And I wanted to say that we need to understand that as boys, as men, we are human beings, and we are born with hearts and feelings. And we are then socialized in a different way. And we need to acknowledge that a lot of men have used violence and have been negative towards women. But we also need to acknowledge that this is how they've been raised. And so if there is generation of men that are pushing towards that change, that are willing to be positive, we should be able to influence other young men that can be positive. And a lot of times, I think in our circles as men, and I said this when I was presenting, is that a man that does negative things is praised. Even the type of material movies that we see push young boys to be negative. But then now we need to change that by us as men pushing us to be uncomfortable. I always give this example of the bathroom to say, when you're in a home, you see a mother and a daughter can go into the same bathroom, bath together and chat together. But you'd never see a father and a son share a bathroom and chat together. So as men, we need to be uncomfortable, to sacrifice our comfort, to be able to nurture and socialize the young men in a different way. So I might have grown in an environment where my father was beating my mother, but I need to be able to be different and teach my sons to be different. So once we change that narrative and we put the spotlight on the positive men, and then the young boys will be able to learn from that positive men and be able to change. It's a lot of work, but it will take sacrifice. And I believe that it will take me as an individual. Personal transformation will lead to group transformation, which will lead to community transformation. So how I relate with my friends and the people around me will then impact our communities. So it starts there, but if we push it more, we can be able to see meaningful transformation. Thank you.
Sunida has a question, and then Mary, a couple of questions will take.
If you're getting late, then I can come later on, because it was an earlier question, so I can wait. It was related to an earlier comment which was coming up.
No, it's okay, you can.
Okay. No, okay. I was just responding to one of the comments that she had made, and in terms of women following up regularly, if the men are there in the caregiving role and all of that. And I was just wondering that sometimes when it's both men and women, it's a personality trait. Some men also feel very, very concerned if their wives are looking after their babies. Some women also feel very concerned if their husbands are looking after the babies. It's a personality trait. But when women do it, it's considered to be normal. But when men do it, either they are looked down upon or they are praised unnecessarily. So, it's one of them. But for women, it becomes normal, or there's a pressure. If women don't act in that caregiving role, that you're not checking on your husband 10 times, or you've not seen if the baby is this thing, it's considered to be, you are apathetic, you are this, you're responsible. So I think it's also that. It's not generalization about all women doing that. Some do out of pressure, some do it naturally. So that's just to add to your point.
The same topic. I think just to continue on that, I think there's also a lot of identity struggles that happen when a child is born. For the mother in particular, it happens for the father as well, but it's much more striking in the mother. And I think with those identity struggles, there's lots of questions, and I think this can lead to some behavior like this. But regardless of those struggles and regardless of those insecurities, I think that leaving this space is critical. Leaving that space for the men to feel responsible and feel respected is critical. On the flip side, I think part of the reason why the women are also filling that space is that the value for these women is not being felt in other parts of their lives or in a generalized way. And so until such time as the women feel fully valued or feel like full individuals, then they're going to continue to grab space where they can. So I think these are some of the other issues, nuanced issues around this.
Thank you very much. I very much agree with what they've said. I've been there myself, and most oftenly, my husband felt offended because he felt that I was demeaning him as a caretaker for our daughter. But it's something that comes even subconsciously. You just want to do it, and it takes a lot of open communication and patience to just deal with it. And most of the time we also are not sure that we are doing the right thing. So we also are trying to make sure that you also know what you're doing. Anyways, so first I want to commend you guys for what you have done. It's incredible. It's an amazing, it's amazing to see men who are passionate about training or building a network of men who are sensitive to women and who are supportive of men. Where I come from back in Kenya, especially in the industry that I work in, is I mentioned in the morning, we are implementing a program called Usalama wa Umma. And this program mainly deals with training male drivers and conductors. It's not just for male drivers, it's only that it's for mainly men because they're the dominant in this industry. And one of the things that we train them is on gender equality and the roles that both men and women play, all in an effort to help them understand their different gender roles and how our different gender and sex should not define how we relate with one another. One of the biggest challenges is patriarchy and cultural norms. Because where I come from, men believe that even I as a woman should not tell a man how to behave or how to treat another woman. And one example is when we started implementing the project, we were doing the training ourselves. So we had developed the training manual with the support of a couple of men. Unfortunately, when we went to the ground and tried to mobilize men and train the men, we were dismissed. We could not even hold one training session. And what we did is we went back to the drawing board and we asked ourselves, this is a battle that we cannot win. So what we did, we had to engage another male facilitator to help us with this training. And one of the other challenge was we needed to identify a facilitator that also believed in what we were advocating for. And finally, that worked as magic. Yeah, right now, if I call for a training, an Usalama wa Umma training, I even get over what I had budgeted for. If I am organizing a training for 50 male conductors, 50 participants, I even get 60. I even have to send others away. But the other challenge is, for you who are already doing the work, there is also other men out there who don't really understand what you're talking about, who are not in the same page as you are. And most oftenly, you'll find that these men will oftenly regard you as weaker men who are not sure of what they're doing. And then how do you handle that? The reason why I'm asking you that is because I've had a couple of men come to me and tell me, this is what is happening. What do we do? We are trying to support our families, we are trying to support women to do this and this. But there is a lot of negative forces coming from outside. And I even remember at one point, I left my husband to go to work when my baby was just 7 months. And he had to take her to the hospital because she got sick when I was away. And she met these two men who stopped him on the road and asked him where the wife was. And the next thing they told him is, this is not your job. And all he said is he got surprised because it got him off guard. But it made him think about what the kind of perception that the society have about the different roles and how the gender roles keep on changing. So I don't know if that's a comment, but I hope we're getting where I'm going with this. But it's all in an effort to help me understand the different strategies that you are using during your implementation of your various projects that can be helpful to us who are also trying to form alliances with men. And because we cannot, as I said in the morning, we cannot work in isolation. We need your support. We need the support of the many men out there. We need to know the strategies then to use to make sure that what we are working towards is finally achieved. Thank you so much.
Maybe you want to take it?
Yeah, a couple of thoughts, and we brought up the word patriarchy quite a few times. And I think interesting to think about, we often, as we say that, think kind of it means all the power sits in all men, and and no women have power kind of thing, without thinking about as well the multiple ways that patriarchy plays out in men's lives. I think if there's a crisis of masculinity in the world now, there's more patriarchal power concentrated in the hands of fewer men. A lot of what we see around the world now of lower income men trying to find an identity or some means to be providers with fewer resources to go around. So part of the crisis is about I've got to be a provider to be a man. If I can't be a provider, we break that equation, therefore what am I? But a lot of men with a lot of wealth in their hands holding power over all of us. So I think part of, if I, getting to your question in the back of the room, what are the difficult conversations to have? One is, how many men can we start a conversation with and say, how's that privilege going for you? Is not a conversation that goes very far. But I do think it is one that does have to be talked about. The other one is, how has patriarchy affected your own life in terms of how it shapes our consciousness and subjectivity and our beings as men? Because it tells us you can't really be your authentic self. You can't show the deepness of connections you'd like to have. You can't show when you're vulnerable. You can't ask for help. You can't be as connected to some people as you would like to, because that is, and fill in the blank, ridiculed, criticized, bullied, told that you're not a real man, told that you're inferior. So growing up in patriarchy as a male, as the little miniature patriarch, is to be constantly policed of whether you're living up to it. That is not to decenter the conversation from women to men, but it is to say something is taken away from men in a system that doesn't let us be our full selves. That's a conversation very few men want to have as well. And I think, to me, part of what I see, I really agreed with the comment of, let's not be swayed that somehow a couple of corporate social responsibility projects are going to fix the deep inequality in the world. But I also would like to see a shift that we're not up here because we're trying to be nice guys or good men. For me, the issue is we have better lives as men, as human beings, in a world where we live more equitably between each other. And I think part of this equation as well is helping men see that the cost of domination, the cost of patriarchy, corrodes our souls as much as it has corroded and damaged the lives of women in far different ways, but it also leaves us with deep wounds that we don't talk very much about. So I think we want men to have a self-interest in a planet that's better because we're equitable and we see each other as equals. So to me, that's when we would start to move from being a collection of a few projects, and I think that is a limitation of the men engaged work, is that we kind of get stuck in the project piece of it instead of what the big social movement needs to be around how we all benefit from a more equitable planet. Now that sounds really big and vague, but I do think if we keep the goal on that, it does drive us to look at bigger structural approaches and not just think we can do another really well done project, which we're all good at and we'll keep doing more of. But I think to keep the focus on just how big that is, and that men, at some point, we need to not see it as men versus women, but that we have a self-interest as male identified individuals in a world that doesn't divide our bodies and our psyches the way it does.
Can I just say on that point, and I'm a cynic on all of this, but as the mother of 4 sons, I think it's a very important point, because yourselves, you are grown men. You can make a connection with that if your humanity is still someplace there. You can put yourself in touch with the downside of being a man of the patriarchy, because you can, if you have anything back, if you care for your children, if you cry at a movie, you can reach that point in yourself. As the mother of, I still have 1 young son, his future is only the power of the patriarchy. He's not experiencing that pain yet. And I think that, for me, that is where you reach the education of the boys, if you can get them before. Right now, all he's got is privilege. And that is where we have to reach them before that point, before they go bad.
There is another question, then we can, you want to respond.
I like to congratulate all of you that you are doing really different and decent work. And in Nepal, we used to say, like, if the mother die of her young children, they will be orphaned. Then, if the father died, So I hope your initiation will help to make children no orphanage, even whoever died, and that's your target should be on that level. So it would be really great that your target should be on there. So what I wish you will do on that level. Thank you.
I need to respond. She asked some question. In my country, I think not my country, all over the world, the patriarchy still maintains some legal, cultural, values and legal system. One system is, still we use surname as father's name. So I myself try to challenge, as Desmond said, why we can't use my wife as same name as surname. So when my first daughter, we use surname, wife name and my name. Then my father-in-law, that means my wife's father, asked me, look Veere, you have to pass the law 2/3 from parliament to change the surname. So I asked why and how. He said no, those kind of law, there are friends, they use this change and they put like a Facebook campaign, mother's name as a father, mother's name also a surname campaign, they put their children as a mother's name. That's what I tell you, when we start some kind of challenge myself, definitely there are challenges. But we need to encourage ourselves to face the challenges. Once you have courage, we can change the entire system. So, is it what you ask me,
Yes, because sometimes, as I said, men listen to other men.
Yeah,
So
and
it's
also
important we have men like you to talk to other men, so that the message is well received.
yeah, men talk to men about men is powerful tool. And also, she mentioned that the men, when you deal with men, we need to make them understand they are also suffering because of the masculinity. They are also losing. They are also victim. When the men realize they are also gaining something to change or sharing the power, they enter into dialogue. One example I can share with you, my father last year, he died when he was 75 years. 6 months he got sick, and we took him, we asked him, what do you want to do? And he said, I want to give free meal for 1,000 people. We did it. And he wanted to come India, we arranged it. Again, he is sick. And we took him to the doctor. Doctor said, no, any problem. Then my father said, doctor, I have mental problem. Then we took him another doctor and said, tell him there are few problems like sugar, pressure. Then the doctor said, you have sugar and pressure. Then my father said, I don't have any problem, he's a mental problem. So we thought, okay, we are mental or father mental or doctor mental. Then we took him as a psychologist, and 2-3 weeks continued class. Then my father said to him, I have a problem because my children's not love with me, not caring with me. So we are very upset and asked the doctor, ask him the reason. And my father said to him, my children used to come to home and spend time and time, hour and hour with my wife. They never spend time with me. They sleep on my wife's lap. They never sleep on my lap. We carry my father, our mother, and round the house, and she's so happy and says, no. By the naming of no, she asked me to go. So why? Because from the childhood, we experience my mother. We slept on my mother, and my father never carried to hospital wherever as the masculine framework, and he never talk with us. We talk, we speak through the mother. And my mother carried from childhood, we experienced, my father never carried, because as you said, and the last time my father need those kind of feminine love and care. Then my doctor said, try once. Then we try. We go to the room and because we never sleep on my father's lap. So we tried and we go and sleep and look his face is like never smile. Because that's what the society, brought him as a man. And in the picture of my house is not a laugh at all. So he don't know if a children slap on the lap, what he want to do. My mother used to do like this. We are sleeping at a luxury house, luxury hotel, but he never give the luxury on sleep on my old mother lap. But my father wanted to get those experience. But we slept on him, he don't know how to do. Then 1 minute, 2 minutes, we came out the room. And my brother, my sister, everyone tried to do, they can't. Then we tried to carry him, my father, like standing. We carry with 2 minutes, he doesn't do anything, we put him on the bed. And we went to the room and asked, Father, how are you? Fine. How are you? Fine. Because he don't know how to continuously talk with children. My mother used to ask me, why, how are you? How's the younger one? Now she's speaking. So many questions. We don't know how to spend the time with my mother. It went on and on and on. But finally my father catch my hand and not even crying, tearing. And we took him again to the hospital. He said, doctor, they are acting. Yes, we do act. Because we can't give the full love to him. You are laughing, but still I feel so sad. I'm sometimes crying myself. If I do same as my father, I also will cry once my old age. So I need to change myself now. So I need to give my love to my children. I need love to my wife. If I love more than my wife, my children learn from me. And I need to be a role model to my 5 children and society. So this is how, if you share we have own stories, especially more men. If you share with men, they will realize, they will sensitive. And with men, we can't talk, you have to gender sensitive, give space for women. They never. We have to touch their heart. Heart to heart talk is more powerful than, lecturing. Thank you very much.
I just wanted to respond to your incidents that you mentioned somewhere in your incidents that how we deal with when society or friend circle says us that you're not a man enough. And so I just wanted to add about it because I also have my personal experience because I'm not with a good height and a build and sort of thing. So some of my friends also considered me not a man enough in the traditional way of this thing. But one actually needs to be comfortable with himself first. In terms of defining yourself as a man or a human or whatever gender identity you want to put yourself in, you have to be comfortable with your own identity as being a human being and whatever. And if you are comfortable with that, now I myself, I'm not feeling any shame about it by saying that my height and build is not good enough traditionally to fit into the man's shape or size. And now it is comfortable to even for me to deal with such kind of concerns when come from the young men from our community. One guy came to me and he said that I will not wear that hashtag BSFA t-shirt because I do not have the muscles enough to wear that t-shirt. And he was like, and it was actually a hour and a half conversation with him to tell him that this t-shirt is necessary to identify yourself as a Azad Foundation, and it carries a really beautiful message. And then later on, I mean, he actually used that t-shirt and wore it, but he wore another shirt on it to just hide his, to hide his like not muscle enough hands, and you know. So these are sort of also experiences we have, like in our personal lives also and in the communities. And there are also some interesting that, see, this process of change is also, you know, a 4-step ahead and a 2-step backward. So that also one needs to understand. Now, conversation in a football match between two young men, that you cannot use abusive word about mother and a sister because you are with the Azad Foundation t-shirt. What does that mean? It means when you do not wear Azad Foundation t-shirt, you can use this abusive word. You know, but at least we were able to establish, you know, a sort of code of conduct during the, you know, community activities, and even in the sport matches, whoever use the abusive word or aggression, masculine behavior, he will get a yellow card during the match. And you know, so sort of things also we are also exploring and understanding their own issues. As I also shared in my presentation, that this masculinity, real man, gender equality, patriarchy, these are really heavy words for them. Their real concerns are how to impress a girl, actually. And that is how we came up with that video, because their real life experiences are different. These are our agendas, these are not their agendas. So that also need to, you know, like one has to negotiate with their own agendas with the football match and our own agendas with the yellow card for the abusive words. Thank you.
I just have one question which I thought all of you for you, because Poonam left me with one thought which I thought I should share with you. So when we are looking at caregiving as a very important thing, the one question comes in mind, that are we, I mean, those who are engaging with men and masculinities, and especially men and gender equality domain, are pushing a softer agenda which is caregiving, not looking at control, not really looking at, you know, sexual control or violence. Violence, yes, of course, but especially control over sexual choices and intimate partner violence, all these things. So, I mean, is it that the caregiving is something which is softer to push, or, you know, so there's some thoughts on that, you know, or what are the key critical, I would say, goals that, as someone who works with the men alliances, who wants to really push the envelope further, especially in relation to equality, men and women equality, is it starting with the softer ones? Is it a strategy, or is it something which we thought easier to do, that's why we are here? So just a thought-provoking thing that, you know, maybe.
Yeah, thank you very much. For me, with my experience working with men, we found that men are more willing to listen to you if you're going to talk about their children, if you're going to talk about their mother, if you're going to talk about their sisters. They're willing to listen. So I believe there's an entry point where you can be able to get their attention. And once you get their attention, once they understand, then you are able to engage with them and be able to move on ahead. The difficult part, or difficult man, is one who says, you want to go and talk about gender-based violence, I'm not interested, and walks away. But one that is willing to listen, and then you are able to then engage and go further and deeper. So to answer your question is that it has to start somewhere. And you have to gradually start having that conversation, to the extent where now when you talk about policy, when you talk about land ownership, you know, the man has a background and understands why it's important for women to be able to own the land or have certain rights. So that's where it starts.
Yeah, I think we have to be careful that in talking about caregiving or even fatherhood, one, we're not only just talking about biological fathers, and we're also not just talking about that we're going to overcome patriarchy by men changing a few more nappies every day. This is, I think what we have to do is acknowledge that if men do 50% of this, this means we're not going to get all those promotions in the workplace. This means we will not be the obvious spokespersons because we will be at home caring for the elderly parent or the child who needs the care. So I think if we're not careful, it can become soft and sort of meaningless and just some lovely photos of men holding babies, which make us feel good but don't change power dynamics. But if we go to the point of saying, we should do this, we should be doing 50% of this, we have to change other parts of our lives, and I think that gets at the root of power and privilege. And I think also in terms of violence, because I think we as activists have spent years thinking we could legislate ourselves out of violence. And I think we have to keep doing that, obviously. And we have to keep denouncing. And the Me Too movement in lots of countries has been really important to call out men who have abused power. But then what do we fill those lives with? Because I do believe that violence is learned, and it's usually learned by men who have experienced it or witnessed it themselves. That's not an excuse for their violence, but it is to say we've got to fill that space with something else. And I think it would be empathy and care is the thing to me that is the opposite of violence. So I do think this is partly part of the roots. But again, it can't just stay at the level of a few men carrying their babies for a few more minutes every day. It's really got to be, what does it mean if we reorient our world so that we see that as important as what we do, as earning a living, driving a car, or whatever else that we do. So I think if we're not careful, it can become that. But I think that's what we're trying to get at.
Any questions? Okay.
I just thank you all. I mean, it's a fascinating conversation, and I have like many things rolling around in my head. I really like the framing, Gary, of thinking about privilege and behind the word patriarchy, because I do think there's a lot of dissection there, and power and privilege is what we're all working toward getting shifting at the end of the day, and in a very broad way in lots of different settings. Two things. I can't remember the second already. It's probably being old. But the first one is I do think that I have a 31-year-old daughter, and one of the things I've always asked her, she always thought I was crazy for years, whenever she was going out with anyone, is, what does his mother do? And so, because I really was trying to get at, by asking that really, what is the allocation of roles in the family? Who's responsible? Who's doing what? Because I felt that if that was going to be the driving model. And this is why, in some way, and this is why it was fascinating that your study showed that what fathers did was really one of the key indicators of whether men were playing caregiving roles. But I do think that and I wanted to ask this question of Poonam too, because I don't necessarily see the care space as a space where you can't enter into these discussions and where you can really drive change. Because in some ways I think it is the root of the power dynamics in the household, and that driving some change there can really create change elsewhere. Though I do also agree it can be made to be very lightweight and frothy without that framing in the background. So, and I do agree with Desmond that it's also, in all these settings, I find this in the corporate world very much, you need an entry point. You want people to engage in a rights-based conversation about what economic empowerment looks like. You're not going to just walk in and say, this is what we want you to do. It's about all these different rights that you have to address if you're trying to economically empower women. You find the engaging point, and then you bring out all the other things they have to think about, which of course, once they sort of trust you and understand, they start saying, oh yeah, we should do that, and we should do that, and it becomes an entry point. So finding those entry points is critical, and if this is one of them, that's great. And so I guess the only question I had was, do you think that there is, that I feel more hopeful looking at millennial populations and the way they're growing up, and while they still see patriarchy in spades in lots of rigid ways, they also see a lot of different models. And do you see that as being a hope for change, and how we can engage in that to make it more hopeful?
Sorry. I'll respond to the millennials, because for us, we've actually had a lot of positivity around the young men pushing to be part of, the upbringing of the child. And it has also brought a bit of pushback from women, because one, a lot of men are willing to say, if we're separating, I want custody of my child. And a lot of women are saying, no, if this is what this work is doing, then we don't expect men to be taking up the kids, because they're worried if they're even going to be able to take care of them. So, and I've found that millennials are more, they're easily to get attached and willing to learn how to take care of their kids than the older folks. So there is pushbacks, there is challenges around that, but we see more changes. And that's why I believe that, our sacrificing of our comfort zone would be able to help the next generation be able to see that change in the next, maybe, 5 years, 50 years. Might take a while, but then we need to start somewhere.
Yes, sometimes we need to be very careful, the caring work. Mother, as Teresa said, their connection with children, and they enjoy. And sometimes father, out 1 week or 2 weeks, they enter the family and spend money and took their kids out KFC or McDonald's. And he controlled 2-3 days, love and caring. And mother feels sad because, by the name of caring, sometimes some men took this wrong way to create a conflict between husband and wife. That's what very, very careful when we do this work. Do no harm. It's very, we need to consider the do no harm principle. We may harm by sometimes, engaging men. The men also try to be a protector sometimes, because we are engaging to protect women. So those kind of negative thinking also can be harm for women. So that's why we've been very careful when we engage men into care work, or engaging men for gender justice too.
I think there is a clear trend that the younger generation, and particularly young women, aspire for greater equality, and then I think there's a greater acceptance of that of the younger generation of young men. Where we see it kind of hitting a wall, from data from the US and Europe, and I would say some parts of urban Latin America, is their aspirations for equality are higher than the older generation, and then children came along. And that's when about a third of those who aspire for equality achieve it, and the other 2/3 really struggle and often fall back into the patterns that women do more of it. And men's income goes up, and women stagnate, so they stay out of the workplace and all the rest. So I think it does tell us again the structural. Our sons and daughters have higher aspirations, which is great. But I think have we made a world that makes that possible in terms of how the workplace is structured, access to leave, access to childcare, and a world that can meet the demand that I think this younger generation has, that we deserve greater equality. Where is it? And so I think that says we've changed the norms, but what are the structures around that need to change?
So Sumedha, and then the last two questions, because we are also running out of time.
Thank you. I wanted to comment on your earlier point about caregiving and men entering the field of caregiving. And when you say about caregiving, it is in two spheres according to me. One is the paid care and the unpaid care. And when men enter the paid care, it is an easier journey for them. The acceptance is easier. Similarly for women also. But because women traditionally have been in the unpaid care, there is a stigma attached to the women also in the unpaid care. because the women who are working always look down upon that. There is a politics about work there as well, because it is unpaid. But also the men who choose, the house husbands or the full-time fathers who choose to be full-time caregivers for their family members, they are stigmatized for much more than women are. So it's fine for men to be caregivers while working in a mainstream job, but to completely take the caregiving role because it is unpaid has a lot of stigma, which is much more than being, comfortable about your physical attributes, is what I would feel. Because the society at large, both men and women, look down upon that. So I think together for both men and women, we need to look at the unpaid care work in a much more focused way to say that both of them need to be recognized as work, which is very, very important for society.
You and then Swati, this is last.
I just want to appreciate you all because of your great mind change that you have brought in yourself to look at life, the partnership, and the taking the human side of masculinity into consideration. But at the same time, is there not a very strong pull against it through the religions, through the existing cultures that are so strongly embedded into the blood of every human being all over the world? I come from a very highly patriarchal society in Kerala, the Syro Malabar Church. And for me, whatever I am doing is just against it. So when I see men thinking in line of changing, coming to terms with femininity or masculinity, whatever it is humanity for me. That humanness you are experiencing when you are caring for your children. Even a dog, which is a pet dog, you experience some kind of a softness in your heart, in your mind, when you touch it, and when we care as a child, it is much more, it is yours. So, and that part is not considered in the society. Even we women are teaching the children to have this, power politics in the house itself. We are the one teaching the man is higher, the woman is lower. The child, we are teaching the children to look differently at the boy child and the girl child. Everything, the women are continuing those things more. And the patriarchal society led by our religions. So we have to fight against that too.
Last, Swati, you have something?
Yeah, just a comment.
Comment to that.
Yeah. I can be loud enough. I don't have any question. So this whole discussion just left me a little disturbed in the sense I'm just back to the square one, where I've been thinking and struggling with I know it is an alliance with men and all. So what it takes to be man, earlier, not earlier, even today, to be to your wife something, you'll be called a real man. Or maybe that dynamic, it's just changing. That Suraj was talking about so how this, so what it takes to be man now is if you wear a B Sakha shirt or you take care of women and be their rescuer or just to understand what women need. So now it's the real man or something. So now, what I get out of it is actually in this whole conversation where the women are the receivers and they are the oppressed most. I know even men have their lived experiences and not all men are privileged. By knowing the facts that I found that this heart-to-heart talk, binary of good men and bad men, just ended up glorifying men at the end of the day in our struggles. And so this is what I found very disturbing. I just do not know how to deal with it. I'm just back to square one. I do not know how to deal with the struggles that women do have, from a feminist point of view and from my own lived experience. I just do not know. This whole conversation just ended up glorifying men at the end of the day, because if you behave differently or if you're a good man, then probably, we can make alliances with men. I do not know. Heart-to-heart talk doesn't impress me. What make more sense if we talk about justice and understand and just even stay back where you have to stay. This is what my comment from my experiences, what I gathered out of this whole discussions.